what is the criteria necessary to get nominated for a Grammy? Like, is it based on sales?
No. So the way it works is that you would enter the Grammy, you'd enter the product in the entry period, which is the month of October. And the thinking behind that is if you're going to release a record in September, knowing that September is the last month you can do it in the eligibility year, you're going to have the information that you need to enter it in October, by the end of October. So that's the thinking behind that. So, and the reason that it's set up that way is because we have to back up the awards process. The way it works is that the entry period happens, and then our awards department, we only have 12 people in there, so they have to process 17,000 records that come in every year and they get entered in by the members and by the record labels, like I was mentioning. And the record labels then, they pick which categories that they feel are most appropriate. We have 82 categories, which also includes a couple of categories for film or video. So there's a long form video, which is like documentaries, concert footage, things like that. Then there's short form, which is your typical music video of 3 to 5 minutes. But we have Grammy categories that honor entire records. We have categories that honor the performance on a particular song. We have some that are for songwriting. We have some that are for producers, some that are for engineers, some that are for, like I said, liner notes or graphic design. Of the 82 categories, the first 4 categories are what we call the general field, and they encompass every genre. And that's record of the year, song of the year, album of the year, and best new artist. And the best new artist is the only one that actually honors an artist per se, just for being the artist. I don't know why, but that's the one. And the way that works for best new artist is that you can only have put out 3 CDs or 3 albums or 3 releases. Once you've put out 3, you're no longer a new artist. So the way it works is the whole process is done online. You go into the password protected area I was talking about in the Grammy 365. And then what you would do is you would go and say, okay, this is a jazz record, and it's a vocal jazz record, so I'm going to enter it into whatever category number that is. I don't know off the top of my head, probably 37. So I'm going to go to category 37, I'm going to enter that record in. And then you will then input all the information it asks for, the title, who played on it, the little barcode number has to go in there, all those kind of things, because that helps the awards department track down. They have to verify when it was released and to make sure that it is available for sale on a national level, like I was talking about. And so that's that part of the process. And then at the end of the entry process, now you can enter your own record, you could enter your friend's record, you can enter, say you heard, Deke's new record, you want to enter it in. You can do that too. Deke can do it too. Things can be entered multiple times. It really doesn't make a difference. Sometimes the record labels enter their records in. I always encourage the artists to go ahead and enter their own record as well, because it doesn't matter that it's a duplicate. And I can tell you one example just from a couple of years ago. Atlantic Records didn't enter Mark Broussard's record in, and I called Mark up. I was like, dude, because I call the award department. I always keep a track of who in Louisiana is putting out records, and I'll call them up and I'll say, hey, you should enter your record in, and that's kind of the way I help, it helps me with recruiting new members as well. And so I called Mark up and I was like, dude, Atlantic didn't put your record in. And he says, well, man, they've been trying to screw me left and right. I said, well, send it, I'll make sure it gets entered in. And I made sure that he got it entered in. And it didn't get nominated that year, but the bottom line is that the labels don't really care about you. They have their own strategies on what they want in there. So for them, they don't want albums sometimes competing against each other. So I always tell the artist, it's upon you to enter your own record. So once things are entered into the process, we have certain categories. Oh man, I don't have that chart with me. Not all the categories, but a lot of the genre categories have what we call screening committees. And each of the 12 chapters can nominate people to be on a national level screening committee. And what their job is not to vote, their job is to make sure that if you say this is a jazz record, they listen to it and make sure it's a jazz record. Sometimes it comes into question, is this a pop record or is this a rock record or is this an R&B record? So those committees' jobs are to hash out that this recording get put in the right category. And once they've all been put in those categories, then the first round of voting happens in October. Each of our voting members gets a ballot by paper, and then they go to the website and they log in, and they can see in all those categories which ones what happens is every voting member can vote in those first 4 categories I was talking about. Then of the remaining 78 categories, which we call the genre categories, you self-select 20 categories that you feel you have the expertise in those categories. So I mean, I enjoy listening to classical music, but I don't know who's making the classical records today. You know, I don't know who the best artists are out there today. I'm not as familiar with that, so I don't vote in those categories. Same, you know, well, I don't really enjoy listening to heavy metal, but you know, I don't vote in the heavy metal categories, or I don't vote in ones that I don't have expertise. I'll pick the 20 that I feel like I have the most expertise and knowledge. And then some of those categories may have 40 albums entered in. Some of them may have 300 entered in. In that first round, it's incumbent upon the voter to be familiar with as much as they can, and then to self-select what they think of top 5 records in that particular category. And you mark those down on the ballot. And then once you've done your 24 categories, then you send those into our accounting firm. They tally up all the top 5s from all the members across the country. Then those become the 5 Grammy nominees. And then the process happens again in December, and that's when you vote on the winner. Then you just pick one of the 5 nominees as the winner. Sometimes there's a tie and you might have 6 nominees. If a category doesn't get 40 entries in it, then they'll only pick 3 nominees. So it's, you know, it's little bits and pieces of variety in how it goes down. To answer Deacon's question a little more, once your record is entered in, nobody can take it out. So once you're in the battle. So what I encourage people to do is enter as many categories that you think are as appropriate as possible. And I get this question all the time, I'm never going to win a Grammy, nobody knows who I am. I'm like, okay, that might be true. But what I tell people is, of the 12,000 plus voting members across the country, they are some of the biggest decision makers in the music industry, right? So when they read through the ballot, they're not going to skip your name. I mean, yeah, I might be gravitated to a name they recognize, but you're still in the mix with the biggest names in the industry. So whether they listen to it at that point, vote on it at that point, or whatever, you begin to build name recognition in that person's mind of who this artist is. And then say you're going to their town in San Francisco and playing a gig. That might cause them to come out and see you, or read about you in a newspaper, or pay a little bit more attention to you, or listen to your music and say, wow, that would be great in my project, or I like that song, I want to cover that on my next record. I mean, you never know what kind of opportunities are going to happen. And that's one of the things I tell people all the time. And I mean, who's it? James Brown said it best, right? You know, it's 10% talent and 9%, 90%, you know, perspiration. Get out there and make it happen. Get out there and meet people and open doors, because that's how you get these opportunities. You know, that's how I got my job. That's how a lot of people get the gigs they get, is because they stepped into the place and put their face in the place. You know, so you know, there is no one magic bullet to getting a Grammy nomination. It is a matter of getting people to hear your record. So it could be that you make sure that the radio stations are playing it, that you go out and get reviews from the newspapers and the magazines. I tell people, the same way you get people to buy your record and pay attention to it is the same way you get the voting members to pay attention to it as well. Because I've been a voting member for 17 years, and I buy more music during the voting season because I'm turned on to all this music that I didn't even know existed. You know? I mean, just today I was going through, like I said earlier, I keep a track of all the Louisiana records that I know of are out there. And just today I saw 3 or 4, just looking through my different resources, that I didn't know were out there. I'm like, I'm going to have to go get that record because I love this guy, or I love this girl, and you know, I know she's going to make a good record, so I'm going to go listen to it. And then when it comes time to vote, I'll make that determination appropriate. I'll tell you this. There's a Lafayette musician who called me a couple years ago and said, I got this guy out in LA and all I got to do is give him $10,000 and he's going to guarantee me I'm going to get a Grammy nomination. I said, Joe, that's what I call him right now, don't do it. Oh yeah, he guarantees it. I said, don't do it. So he did it anyway. And this guy's a well-known Lafayette musician. If I said his name, you all will know him. And he did it anyway. And he didn't get nominated, and he called me up, what happened? I'm like, dude, that dude took your money and ran. Nobody has the list. Nobody has a magic formula. One of the things, like I said earlier, my job is to protect the integrity of the voting process. So I'm not allowed to give any one member our entire list. Now you can find out who our members are by coming to our events, going to my Facebook page, seeing people. I mean, you know, those kinds of things, you can figure out who people who are voting members are, you know, by participating. Go to Grammy 365 if you're a member and check out who in your area are members. Connect with them. You know, come to our events. Voters determine the winners in the second round. So in the first round, they determine the 5 nominees. And then there's a second round of voting that determines the winners.
So why is it so coincidental that the people who win all the Grammys are people who have sold more records than anybody else?
Because just more people are familiar with them, but that's not always the case.
In fact, one person who won a Grammy that didn't have a big million-seller record.
You heard of Rebirth Brass Band?
Oh, I didn't talk about that.
That's a Grammy. There's no difference. They're all the exact same award. It is not based on sales. It's not based on popularity. It's based on the people who vote.
That's the rumor, though.
Well, I'm here to dispel it. I'm a part of the process. I've been a voting member for 17 years. I've been an employee for 8 years. And I've witnessed the process. And granted, the people on the big major companies, especially in those big categories, have gigantic marketing budgets. And they get the word out there more than the average person can afford to. I can't argue with that. That's just reality. Well, that doesn't mean it's any better or worse than the one, you know, but the Grammy is a Grammy. So you don't say Michael Jackson is a Grammy Award winner, and it doesn't mean the same thing when you say Rebirth is a Grammy winner, or Alan Toussaint is a Grammy winner, or Dr. John is a Grammy winner. It's the same exact award. It just has a different category on the plaque. Upwards of 60% of the Grammys that were won this year were by independent artists. But when you look at the categories, I mean, half of them are for smaller independent artists to start with. Now, more than anything, popularity probably has more to do with it than a lot. I mean, I can give you another example. About 5 years ago, Beausoleil had their Live at Jazz Fest record out, and Michael Doucet had worked on a record for Smithsonian that he spent 2 years working on. 2 years of his blood, sweat, and tears putting into his records. And he wound up being nominated against himself in the category. And the record for Beausoleil, because they were more popular, because the name Beausoleil resonated with the voters, and not necessarily with Michael Doucet on his own, he beat himself, and he was kind of pissed off and came over to me, because I was standing right there when he got the Grammy. I was there. And he's like, well, I guess I should be happy I won a Grammy, but you know, it kind of sucks that I won a Grammy for an album that I didn't even approve before it went on to sale. Because it was one of those Live at Jazz Fest recordings. And then the next year, Faux Filet, who's another Cajun group out of Lafayette, the little young kids, they had their studio album out that they had put a year into, and the same company, Munch Mix, who does all the Live at Jazz Fest recordings, they entered the Live from Jazz Fest Faux Filet CD in the same category, and they went to their lawyer and had their lawyer write a letter to the Live at Jazz Fest people telling them to pull that record out of the Grammys because they don't want to have to compete against themselves. And they wound up getting nominated for the other one, but they didn't. But, you know, it is complicated. I mean, that's why part of my job is to try to explain it as best I can.
But anyway, really, I want to thank you, Reid, for coming out. It dispelled a lot of myths that I myself had, you know.
Well, I'll tell you this, Deke, and this is a trend I've noticed, because we never had an employee of the company here until 8 years ago when they hired me. And I've grown our membership in Louisiana about threefold in the past, really 6 years. And that's been the spurt that we've seen where we've had many more nominations. And the reason is because people vote for what they know. You know, when you got 300 records in a category, you're going to pick the 5 that you are familiar with. And you're familiar with what's around you. You're familiar with what you hear on OZ, what you hear at the Music Factory, what you hear at the clubs. So you're going to vote for what you know. And so I think that's made a big difference why we've had Rebirth and Dr. John and a lot of these people winning more Grammys these days.
Well, I can say to myself, you have made a big difference. Because you yourself have done all the tremendous work Reid has done in the community. And once again, thank you, Reid, for coming out. Join the Musicians Union, join the Grammy Foundation, join ASCAP, join BMI. There are many, many organizations that you need to join to further your career as a professional.